The International Monetary Fund said that staying on the course on the reform agenda is necessary for the stabilization to evolve into broad-based and stable growth that will ensure a full and lasting economic recovery benefiting the people.
Economic reform program implemented by the Sri Lankan authorities is yielding the first signs of recovery. Real GDP recorded positive growth of 1.6% year on year in the third quarter of 2023, which is the first expansion in 6 consecutive quarters. Shortages of essentials have eased and inflation remains contained. Gross international reserves increased by $2.5 billion during 2023, and preliminary data point to improved fiscal revenue collections during the fourth quarter of 2023. However, challenges remain as these improvements need to translate into improved living conditions for Sri Lanka's people.
The IMF mission chief also elaborated on meetings with political parties and other groups.
From the IMF's perspective, we are of course interested in listening to all parties and get different perspectives from all angles as to what views on economic policy are. We are an inclusive institution, and so it's important for us to have a good understanding of what different economic policy perspectives are, of what's of interest to us for what happens after an election. Of course, we're also interested in what happens before an election, as it is important to adhere to the economic reform program so that Sri Lanka has a chance of emerging from probably its most severe crisis in its history. There are good signs that the program is working, that it is having the intended effect of helping Sri Lanka emerge from the crisis, which takes some time.
The IMF hopes Sri Lanka would reach agreements with regard to debt restructuring ahead of the second review of the program. The IMF official also said that Sri Lanka must convert agreements in principle with China Exim Bank into an agreement and also reach an agreement with China Development Bank, which is also a commercial creditor.
The authorities have made commendable progress with putting debt on a path towards sustainability. The execution of the domestic debt restructuring was an important milestone. A swift completion of final agreements with official creditors and reaching a resolution with external private creditors remain critical. Having reached agreements in principle with official creditors is an important milestone. And that's the milestone that follows the milestone of having completed the domestic debt operation. So now what needs to be done is to finalize these agreements in principle, or rather to convert them into actual agreements with the official creditors so as to complete that portion of the debt restructuring. And secondly, reach agreements in principle with the commercial creditors, where the bondholders are, of course, a significant proportion. So our understanding is that negotiations are ongoing, proposals are being exchanged, and it is important for that process to continue and be completed as quickly as possible. It's our strong expectation that there would be an agreement in principle by the time of the second review. When you say the Sri Lanka debt restructuring, it's actually something like 10 different processes, given all this very complicated creditor landscape. And so doing this sequentially makes sense because there's a limited capacity to how much you can do all at the same time. Of course, there is engagement with all of these creditors, but now that the first two major blocks are close to being completed, the third one can be tackled.